Colossal Biosciences announced on April 7, 2025, that they had used genomic editing to create living direwolves, a species extinct for over 10,000 years. There are fair questions about the ethics or science of what they've accomplished, but this video originates in a different question. Why did they pick the direwolf? Dr. Beth Shapiro is the Chief Science Officer of Colossal and a longtime researcher in extinct animal genomics and restoring extinct species. She wrote the book How to Clone a Mammoth, The Science of De-extinction in 2015 and published a revised version in 2020. In the 256 pages of this book, direwolves are never mentioned. Dr. Shapiro instead explains the case for reintroducing extinct species using the example of the Cascade Mountains wolf. She enumerates its many suitable traits for de-extinction. It was a keystone species in its former ecosystem and was a very recent extinction in 1940, so the ecosystem may have not yet adapted to its loss. On April 7th, Colossal made headlines across the world with its pictures of living, breathing, colossal direwolves. Why would the company choose a species with an unclear place in the ecosystem over an animal with a much more realistic pathway to ecological reintroduction? The next day on April 8th, George R.R. Martin posted D-Day Comes Early on his personal blog, sharing his prior knowledge of the announcement with images of him holding a direwolf. Direwolves are popular characters in his famous book series A Song of Ice and Fire, and he was eager to be involved and invest. A picture circulated shortly afterwards of him beside Colossal CEO Ben Lamb, each carrying one of the wolves. I can't help but look at these pictures through the lens of the Direwolf Husbandry Manual, which is publicly available through the Colossal website to emphasize their high standards of animal welfare. Page 13 lays out guidelines for protected and free contact. Free contact is when humans and an animal share the same unrestricted space. There are no barriers between the human and the animal. There is no free contact with the colossal direwolves unless approved by the head of animal husbandry. If an emergency situation arises where it becomes necessary to enter a space shared by a colossal direwolf, the colossal head of animal husbandry will give additional guidance based on the situation. If free contact is ever deemed necessary, the following will need to be considered. You must carry a rake, shovel, net, or Y-pole. Do not let the wolves get near you. Do not crouch down. Do not attempt to play with the wolves. Ignore bad behavior and reward good behavior. Remove sunglasses, as this may adversely affect the animal if they are not used to seeing humans in sunglasses. Free contact comes with significant risks to human safety and can cause animal safety concerns and animal escape concerns. There are clearly multiple violations of their own policy for their own professional animal handlers, much less VIP guests in the handling of direwolves. The sunglasses are particularly blatant. If they insisted on a photo shoot, there should have been at least 3 staff members and likely the head of animal husbandry themselves available to inform Martin that sunglasses could adversely affect the animal. Their words. Obviously, I'm not going to claim the direwolves were actually hurt by this or there was a huge danger, but this publicity stunt is one in a pattern of already apparent conflicts Colossal is experiencing between its environmental mission and its desire to maintain a huge public profile. I'm not going to discuss the genomic science of what Colossal is doing or the ethics of whether de-extinction is right. This is instead an investigation into Colossal, its messaging and decision-making priorities, and asks, if de-extinction is the right thing to do, how is Colossal doing it? Colossal has tremendous capacity to achieve top billing with the biggest publications in the world. The quest for headlines seems to be so strong that it's creating tension with the scientific goals of the organization. In the New Yorker's breaking article on the direwolf by D.T. Max, it is admitted that the direwolf was chosen for reasons not primarily related to conservation or science. It was decided during a summit involving team heads and Colossal's advisory board scientists. CEO Ben Lamb mentioned that in consultation with indigenous tribes, there was a lot of interest in resurrecting the direwolf. Cultural justifications are certainly important, as humans are fundamentally part of the environment. However, Lamb then pivoted to not just culture, but pop culture. He is quoted as stressing that it was really important that direwolves have cultural cachet. What's the scientific or ecological justification? It's not in the article. Scientists were at the summit, but their arguments are absent amidst the laundry list of popular gaming IPs. What about from Dr. Beth Shapiro? As Chief Science Officer, she should have final say over which species are selected, but I can't find her reasoning on why the direwolf was selected over a candidate like the Cascade Mountain wolf. Remember, she gave a number of scientific and ecological justifications for the Cascade Mountain wolf only a few years prior in her book. However, in 2025, she presents the video How to De-extinct a Direwolf in 7 Steps by jumping right into the process, taking the direwolf choice as a foregone conclusion. In a response video on social media addressing common scientific concerns to the direwolf project, she defends their decision to call the animals direwolves and clarifies their genetic composition. Again, the choice to create direwolves over other species is not addressed. Dr. Shapiro's positions are worth further examination because they illustrate the tension between science and the rest of the company's goals. In 2018, the Wall Street Journal featured her in an article, Meet the Scientists Bringing Extinct Species Back from the Dead. At the time, Colossal didn't exist, and Dr. Shapiro was fully a professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of California, Santa Cruz. The article references an earlier anecdote. In 2014, Shapiro taught a graduate class on de-extinction and asked each student to make a case for bringing one animal back from the dead. Some students cited an animal's ecological importance or the value to tourism. According to Shapiro, none of these arguments justifies de-extinction. What's the point of bringing something back if we don't know why it went extinct, she asks? Or if we do know why it went extinct but haven't fixed the problem. Ironically, the article portrays Shapiro as the more cautious party compared to Ben Novak, currently chief scientist at de-extinction organization Revive and Restore. Shapiro at the time said, "I wanted to study the passenger pigeon. Ben wanted to bring the passenger pigeon back to life." Even the tourism justification, which was explicitly not sound in 2014, seems to be on the table. The New Yorker article mentions that Shapiro had visited Mauritius, where local officials were excited about reintroducing the dodo to draw tourists, an idea that her colleague CEO Lam was quite keen on. Speaking of the dodo, a short white paper on the Colossal website lays out a justification for resurrecting the dodo. It explicitly states that unlike for their mammoth and thylacine projects, there is no beneficial ecosystem role planned for the dodo. In fact, it then accuses the straw person who inquires for a reason to focus on the dodo of anthropocentrism and argues that de-extincting the dodo is undoing human recklessness towards the environment. This sounds persuasive, but Dr. Shapiro again took much the opposite view in her book in 2020, pointing out that motivating actions today with blanket ideals of reversing past harms is itself anthropocentric. Indeed, in both of these cases, black short-faced bears and Neanderthals, de-extinction for the purposes of alleviating guilt seems remarkably selfish. What kind of existence would either of these have in the world today? Compelling reasons to bring something back to life are more likely to relate to the species themselves and the role that these species are likely to play in the environment of the present day. Contrast this to her quote in the Dodo white paper. "There has never been more urgency to preserve species than there is today. It's not just important for their continued existence, it's for the greater good of the planet. Together, Colossal and the scientific community at large are committed to our efforts to de-extinct those we've lost." Though she does further defend a hypothetical effort around the dodo in her book as an international symbol of human-caused extinctions, she prefaces this by saying that reintroduction would require restoring its habitat, removing invasive species, and establishing new protected zones. Colossal has indicated no plans for this intensive habitat work, despite a statement in the New Yorker article indicating the resurrected dodo is coming this decade. Dr. Shapiro is not the only scientist at Colossal, and her opinions have likely sincerely changed in various ways. However, a reasoned explanation for her change in perspective and a defense of not just how the company is doing things, but why, is missing, and her influence on scientific decision-making at Colossal is unclear, which is troubling for the chief science officer. There is a white paper for the direwolf where we can find some justification for its potential ecological role. However, this is comprised of 3 references to his past status as an apex predator, a sparse reasoning that doesn't befit the world-class group of scientists who work at or consult for Colossal, who should be eager to present a rigorous vision of how the direwolf fits into the wild. Without this, it's again hard to not conclude that media considerations came first, and the scientific reasoning was created retroactively to justify something already decided. Colossal often defends its focus on marketable species to increase the public profile of conservation. Certainly, it also has a proven capability to do multiple projects in parallel. However, it can't claim there's a moral imperative to act quickly to save the biosphere while also dedicating substantial resources to and honing its primary focus on what appear to be vanity projects. Public relations are a well-oiled machine for Colossal. Jessica McKenzie for the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists gave a science journalist's perspective on how the direwolf story was broken. In her inference confirmed by Colossal, journalists from major publications were given access to the story but kept under NDA. This had 2 major positive impacts for Colossal. First, the simultaneous breaking of the story across major outlets created a media frenzy all over the world. Second, because of the NDA, the journalists who knew the story could only ask outside experts in broad terms about the project, which McKenzie states skewed the reporting to be positive, as no unaffiliated scientists could be given enough details to provide effective criticism. Notable among these publications is Time magazine, which ran direwolves as its cover story, boldly declaring that extinction had been reversed. This article was provided by editor Jeffrey Kluger, who has long covered the Colossal beat, penning the Time article on their woolly mice announcement, as well as the blurb when they were recognized as a top 100 influential company in 2023. By the time many scientists did eventually publish skeptical responses to the direwolf announcement, it had already spread around the world, framed in Colossal's terms. A response to my argument might call me a busybody who wants to stymie the progress of science. Actually, in a strangely aggressive response to criticism of the direwolf project, Colossal accused scientists of exactly that. Why is the scientific community wasting time bickering about species concepts rather than celebrating this monumental achievement and its implications? It's obvious most critics would rather complain than contribute. However, it's precisely open discussion and feedback that drives scientific progress and honesty. My view of Colossal is that the marketing financial wing of the company has grown too influential and willing to flaunt its own scientific principles and guidelines for meager justification. Colossal has already won the PR game, and ironically, its focus on publicity stunts shows a lack of confidence in their work. It got its cover stories all over the world. It's raised over $400 million. However, instead of focusing on its tremendously promising core mission of genomics research, reintroducing extinct species with plausible economic niches, and saving threatened species, which would also generate significant attention, it resurrects the direwolf to get a photo op with George R.R. Martin and press hits in Complex and The Hollywood Reporter. The company has captured the world's attention with its storytelling, but at what point does the story take over everything else they're doing? In my view, if Colossal continues to pick marketable species to de-extinct based on making a statement without a reasoned defense of their ecological role, that's not conservation. That's trophy hunting.